Hello and welcome to Fireside Fairy Tales. My name is Rory, and if you're just joining us, welcome. You're watching Varietal Literature's YouTube channel, a cozy little corner of the internet for narrative. Sorry for the late start and also the weird start. I've had nothing but tech issues, that's why. Stupid little things, nothing too big that should affect us, but of the many. Anyhow, what are we doing tonight? Tonight we are going to continue reading stories from the complete Norwegian folk tales and legends of Asbjornsen and Moe. And if you are watching this live, you can join us in the chat, which is currently growing a little crop of potatoes. You can join us in a little live chat there and talk about those stories as we read them. If you're not watching us live, though, and you do just want to get to the stories, then down in the description below, there will be timestamps. And those timestamps will take you right to the beginning of the stories we're reading today, of which we are reading two. One very short, cute little one about a fox, and the other one a longer one that is like a tossed salad of every Norwegian folktale we've ever read. It's a very unusual structure. Hopefully, everything is working. Hopefully you can hear me. The sound is good and all of that, because it would be the first time everything was working today. As far as my live chat, I see we have Jumpstore, GS, Tammy Morelli, Uncle Kitty, Lizzie Rose. Is anybody else I'm missing? No. Not that I see. It's good to see you folks here. I'm glad to hear that you will finally be getting some treatment, Uncle Kitty. I hope it all goes smooth. And yeah. All right. Well, let's not waste more time in case this whole stream thing wants to blow up on me today. Let's get right to it. So our first tale tonight is going to be about a fox, and our next tale is about Lillekort, which is a very strange tale that, as I'm reading it, as I did when I was reading it, you will think, I think he's read this one before, but you will think it at different points in the story, depending on what stories you remember best, because it's like every tale. It's so strange how many tales are mishmashed together in this one. It has a very interesting intro that I'll be interested to see how the chat reacts to, because it proposes a premise that is, I think, put politely, kind of nuts. And then it just keeps drifting off into wild corners from there. So that's what you have to look forward to tonight. I'll do one more thing and then we will get going here. How is the weather where you folks are, by the way? Because, in case you're wondering, no, my hair is not dirty. My hair is soaking wet. I went for a walk, and midway through the walk, it decided to turn into a downpour. All right. So I'm curious how other people are faring. Whether, you know, Vancouver weather is just Vancouvering, or that's a general thing. Okay. Our first tale tonight comes to us from the complete folk tales and legends of Asbjornsen and Moe. This is the annotated version, as you can see by how thick and beautiful it is. It comes to us from translator Simon Roy Hughes, who has translated basically everything Asbjornsen and Moe ever collected. You should definitely support him. He self-published this, put a ton of work into it over many years. When the video is no longer live, there will be a pinned comment down below where you can pick the book up. As for me, I'm going to read yet another story from it called The Fox as a Herder. Once upon a time there was a wife who should go out to look for a herder. Then she met a bear. And let me get a picture of a bear here. It's a bear just sort of yelling at a woman who is covering her ears. She's wearing sort of traditional Norwegian countryside clothing, and we're going to see why he's yelling at her in a moment. "Where are you off to?" said the bear. "Oh, I'm going to find a herder," said the wife. "Won't you have me as a herder?" asked the bear. "Well, yes, but only if you can call the animals," said the wife. "Hey ho!" said the bear. No, I don't want you," said the wife when she heard him, and she left. After she'd walked for a while, she met a wolf. "Where are you off to?" said the wolf. "I'm going to look for a herder," answered the wife. "Won't you have me as a herder?" asked the wolf. "Well, can you call the animals?" "Ooh!" said the wolf. No, I don't want you," said the wife. And after she'd gone a little farther still, she met a fox. "Where are you off to?" said the fox. "I'm looking out for a herder," said the wife. "Won't you have me as a herder?" asked the fox. "Of course, as long as you can call the animals," said the wife. "Dill-dal-holum," said the fox, so clear and fine. And in the footnotes here, which is worth noting, the fox imitates traditional herding look, used by herders across Scandinavia. If you've never heard it, it does not sound like what I just did, but I can't do it, and it is gorgeous. Anyways. "Yes, I want you to be my herder," said the wife, and she set the fox to herd her livestock. Well, the first day the fox was herder, he ate up all the wife's goats. The second day he made an end of all her sheep, and the third day he ate up all the cattle. When he came home in the evening, the wife asked him where he had left her livestock. "Their skulls are in the river, and their carcasses in the thicket." She was standing, churning, but felt she must nevertheless go and take a look. Could it be true? And while she was away, the fox jumped into her churn and ate up all the cream. And when the wife returned home and saw this, she grew so angry that she took that last drop of cream that remained and threw it after the fox so that the drop fell on the end of his tail. And that is how the fox came to have a white tip to his tail. Now, if you've watched this stream for a while, you know I'm a sucker for the "that is how this happened" natural phenomenon kind of folklore. I don't know why. There's just something very delightful about it to me. Anyhow. Our main story tonight, though. Yeah, Lizzie Rose says that's what you get for hiring a predator as a herder. Yeah, just because he can make the call doesn't mean he's trustworthy. The next story in the book, which we're not reading here tonight, is The Smith They Dared Not Let Into Hell. And I only mention that here. Normally I don't note the stories I'm not reading because I've read it before. And it is in my top 5 folktales, if not near the top. Although I think my top is probably still that, I can't remember the name of it. The Bag of Wind one. But, which is kind of not a folktale, kind of a folktale. It's a sort of author who grew up in that era doing his own version of it. But The Smith They Dared Not Let Into Hell is such a fun story. If you guys haven't watched that, I did do a video of it. If I was a better YouTuber, there'd be some link down below, but I'm not. So good luck finding it, I guess. In case you're wondering why my viewer count is what it is, it's not a great mystery. All right. There we go. All right. So, this is the mishmash tale that has every tale we've ever read from the Norwegian folklore. Well, maybe not all of them, but there's at least 5 in here I've seen versions of that tale almost unchanged before, and it's all stitched together. But it opens with something that I don't think I've seen before. And I'll say to you, chat, it opens with the birth of a child. What do you think happens? That's the only hint I'm giving you. And we'll see if anyone gets close. I am going to read for you the story. You have until, obviously, the events of the story unfold. But put your best guess in chat. Our next tale is called Lillekort, and it comes to us from, again, the complete Norwegian folk tales and legends of Asbjornsen and Moe, from translator Simon Roy Hughes. Big fat annotated version here, which you can purchase down in the pinned comment below. There was once upon a time a couple of poor folk. They lived in a meager cabin where there was nothing but bleak want. And they had nothing to bite or to burn. But though they had nothing else, they had the pure blessing of God in children, which I have to believe is a line written partially in comedy for what comes next. And they had another one with every year that passed. Now they were expecting one more. The husband was none too pleased with this. He often wept as he paced, giving voice to his pain and saying that there must come a time when he would have enough of God's gifts. And when the time came for his wife to have the child, he went into the woods for some wood, or into the forest for some wood, for he didn't want to see the new screamer. He would hear it screaming for food in due time, he said. When her husband was well gone, the wife had a beautiful boy child, and as soon as he had come into the world, he looked around the cabin. "Oh, dear mother," he said, "give me some clothes from my brothers and some food for a few days, and I will go out into the world and try my luck. You already have children enough, I see." It was at this point where I decided, oh yeah, okay, this is what we're reading. "Oh dear me, my son," said the mother. "You are still too small. There's nothing that may be done." But the boy child insisted and begged and pleaded for so long that his mother had to let him have some old rags and a little food in a bundle, and so he went, cheerfully and trustingly out into the world. But hardly had he gone. I'm sorry, I'm just laughing at the image of like literally a 5-minute-old baby wandering out a door with a little bundle over its shoulder, speaking full English. But hardly had he gone than the wife had another boy. And he looked around and said, "Oh, dear mother, give me some clothes from my brothers, and food for a couple of days. And then I will go out into the world and find my twin brother. You have children enough, you do." "Oh dear me, my son. You are far too small, you poor thing," said the wife. "There is nothing that may be done." But it didn't help. The boy child begged and pleaded for so long that he got some old rags and a bundle of food, and then he rambled bravely enough out into the world to find his twin brother. When now the youngest had walked a while, he saw his brother away off before him. He cried out to him and bade him stay. "Do wait," he said. "You go on your way as if you were being paid for it. But you should have seen your youngest brother before you went out into the world." The eldest stopped then and looked behind, and when the youngest had caught him up and had told him how things stood, that he was his brother, he continued, "Now let us sit down and look to see what mother has given us for food." And so they did. And when they had walked a distance, they came to a brook that flowed through a green meadow. And there the youngest said that they should give each other names. "Since we had to hurry, there was no time to do it at home, so we must do it here." "What do you like to be called, then?" the eldest asked. "I shall be called Lillekort," replied the other. "And you? What do you want to be called?" "I shall be called King Lavering," replied the eldest. And so they christened each other, and then went on. But when they had walked a little while, they came to a crossroads where they agreed to part, each to go their own way. And this they did. But hardly had they walked a little while before they met again. They parted again, and each took his own way. But after a little while it happened again. They met up before they knew it. And so things went the third time. And then they agreed that they should head off in different directions. One to the east, one to the west. "But if the real need and calamity should ever befall you," said the eldest, "you must call for me 3 times, and I shall come and help you. But you mustn't call for me before you are in your direst need." "And it won't be so soon that we see each other then," said Lillekort. And so they bid each other farewell, and Lillekort went east, and King Lavering went west. When now Lillekort had walked a while alone, he met an old, crooked woman who had but one eye. This Lillekort snatched. I'm going to have a drink of water. I'm going to give you guys a chance to absorb what has happened so far and what is barely the beginning of the story. It's a long story. A baby was born, crawled out of the womb, immediately spoke, said, "You have too many kids, ma'am. I'm leaving." Went out. His twin brother was born, followed him out. They christened each other at a stream. Made a deal to never talk to each other again unless they really needed to. And now he's stolen a woman's eye. "Oh, oh!" cried the woman. "Where has my eye gone?" "What will you give me for an eye?" said Lillekort. "I will give you a sword that is such that it can prevail against a whole militia, no matter how great it is," replied the woman. "Yes, give it to me," said Lillekort. And the woman gave him that sword, and she got her eye back. Then Lillekort went on, and when he had walked a while, he again met an old crooked woman who had but one eye. This Lillekort stole before she knew it. Oh, where has my eye gone? Cried the woman. What will you give me for an eye? Said Lillekort. I will give you a ship that can sail over fresh water, salt water, mountains, and deep valleys, replied the woman. Yes, give it to me, said Lillekort, and the woman gave him a tiny ship, which was no bigger than that he could put in his pocket. And then she got her eye back, and they each went off in different directions. When he'd wandered a long time, he met for the third time an old crooked woman, who had only one eye. This Lillekort stole again. And when the woman screamed and misbehaved, like this isn't how you behave when someone steals your eye. And asked where her eye had gone. Lillekort said, What will you give me for an eye? I will give you the ability to brew 100 batches of malt in one brew, said the woman. Well, for such an art, the woman got her eye back, and they went off each in their own direction. Now, when Lillekort had gone a little way, he thought it might be worth trying the ship. He took it out of his pocket and stepped first one foot, then the other, and hardly had he stepped into it with the other than it grew as big as ships on the sea. Then said Lillekort, Go now over fresh water and salt water, mountains and deep valleys, and don't stop before you come to the king's farm. And straightway the ship shot off like a bird over the air until it arrived a little below the king's farm, and there it stopped. They had stood watching Lillekort come sailing from the windows of the king's farm, and everyone was so awed that they ran down to see what manner of man had come sailing on a ship in the air. But as they ran down from the king's farm, Lillekort had stepped out of the ship and put it back into his pocket. For as soon as he stepped out of it, it became as small as it had been when he got it from the old woman. And the folk from the king's farm saw nothing but a small, ragged boy who stood down by the beach. The king asked where he was from, but the boy said that he didn't know. He didn't know how he got there either. But he asked so beautifully for permission to go into service on the king's farm. If there was nothing else he could do, he could at least carry water and wood for the kitchen girls, he said, and he was allowed to do so. People are noticing that there's a lot of mythology in this, and that is true. There's a lot of mythology in all the folklore I read, because mythology is just another part of folklore. It's another stop on a very long path of folklore that extends past any written record we have. Or at least that's the pervasive theory that I find the most compelling. You should look up the roots of wine dark sea as a phrase in Slavic bards from the 40s or 30s, and how it roots back to ancient Greece and beyond. Anyways, when Lillekort came up to the king's farm, he saw that it was all dressed in black, without as well as within, both walls and ceilings. So he asked a kitchen maid what this could mean. Well, I'll tell you, she replied. A long time ago, the king's daughter was promised to 3 trolls, and next Thursday evening one of them will come to fetch her. The Red Knight has said that he is good to save her, but we wonder if he is man enough to do it. And so you see there is a solemn mourning here. Well, when Thursday evening came, the Red Knight went with the princess down to the beach, for she should she meet the troll there, and so he should be there to look after her. But he didn't do the troll any great harm, I wouldn't think, for no sooner had the princess set foot on the edge of the beach before the Red Knight clambered up a great tree that stood there, and he hid himself as best as he could between the branches. What a coward. The princess, for her part, wept and bayed so heartily that he shouldn't forsake her, but the Red Knight didn't care about that. It's better to lose one life than two, said the Red Knight. Meanwhile, Lillekort asked the kitchen maid for leave to go down to the beach for a while. What do you want to do there, then? Said the kitchen maid. You have nothing to do there. Oh, yeah. Dear me. Let me go, said Lillekort. I would like to go down there and have a little fun with the other boys, too. Indeed. Well, go then, said the kitchen maid. But don't let me catch you there longer than when the evening cauldron should be hung up and the roast should be put on the spit. Then bring a decent fathom of wood, and when you come back to the kitchen. Yes, Lillekort promised this, and sprang down to the beach. As soon as he had come down to where the princess sat, the troll came faring, such that the foam roared about him. It was so great and huge that it was fearsome, and it had 5 heads. Fire, screamed the troll. Fire back, said Lillekort. Can you fence? Cried the troll. If I cannot, then I can learn, said Lillekort. And then the troll struck out at him with a great thick iron bar he had in his fist, so that the earth was showered 5 ells in the air. L is just a measure, it's very high. And there's a really cool drawing here that renders the 5 heads in a way that I struggle to describe, but I will try. But it's very cool. So it shows the 5 heads as running from like his navel on his stomach. So he has like a stomach face. Up his chest, one on his chest, his head, and then his back between his shoulder blades, and one down near his butt. Which is not the way I'd always pictured it, but is a fantastically creative way to render the 5 heads, I think. And he's swinging his big bar down on what is a very tiny man who's probably no bigger than his big toe. Well, said Lillekort, that was really something. Now you shall see a stroke from me. And then he grasped the sword he'd gotten from that crooked old woman, and he struck at the troll so that all its 5 heads rolled across the sand. And when the princess saw that she was saved, she was so glad she didn't know how to behave. She both jumped and danced. Sleep now a little on my lap, she said to Lillekort. And while she lay there, she pulled a golden tunic onto him. But it wasn't long before the Red Knight, seeing the danger gone, clambered down out of his tree. He threatened the king's daughter for as long as it took, until she had to promise that she would tell that it was he, the Red Knight, and not our hero Lillekort, who had saved her, for if she didn't, then he, the Red Knight, would kill her. And then he took the lungs and tongues out of the troll and laid them in his handkerchief. and then brought the princess back to the king's farm. Now we've a sense of his size from this story. Does this man have a tarp for a handkerchief? And if he hadn't been honored before, then he was now. The king didn't know what he should do to honor him, and so he always sat at the right hand of the king at table. Lillekort, he went first out to the troll ship and took with him a whole heap of gold and silver goods and other beautiful things. And then he went back to the king's farm, and when the maid saw all the gold and silver, she was terrified. But asked, "My darling, dear Lillekort, where did you get all this from?" For she was afraid that he might not have gotten it in the proper manner. "Oh," replied Lillekort, "I was at home a little, and these goods had fallen out of some vessels, and so I brought them here for you." Well, when the kitchen maid heard they were for her, she asked no more about it, but thanked Lillekort, and all was well and good again. It's like me when I get something there, I'm pretty sure it's like an ill-gotten good on the street or something. Not ill-gotten, like counterfeit, like when you go to like some alley and they're like, "We have Rolexes for $20. And you're like, "I don't want to know more about it." Yes, please. The second Thursday went the same way. All were in solemn mourning. But the Red Knight said that if he had saved the king's daughter from one troll, then he could save her from one more. And he took her down to the beach. But he didn't do that troll much harm either, for when the time came that they should expect the troll, he said, as he had the last time, "It is better that one lose their life than two," and clambered up the tree again. Lillekort asked this time, too, for leave to go down to the beach a little. "What do you want to do there?" said the kitchen maid. "Well, my dear, let me go," said Lillekort. "I would like so much to go down and have a little fun with the other boys." And so he was allowed to go, but he had to promise to be back before the roast needed turning, and then he should bring a full fathom of wood. Lillekort was hardly down by the beach before the troll came faring, so that the foam roared around him. It was as big as the other troll, and it had 10 heads. 10! We don't get a drawing of this one, unfortunately. Maybe 2 under his arms. Where are the heads? Chat will tell you. "Fire!" screamed the troll. "Fire back," said Lillekort. "Can you fence?" cried the troll. "If I cannot, then I can learn," said Lillekort. Then the troll struck out at him with his iron bar, and it was even bigger than the first troll had, so that the earth sprayed 10 ells into the air. "Well," said Lillekort, "that was something, that was. Now you shall see a stroke from me." Then he grasped his sword and struck at the troll so that its 10 heads all danced across the sand. Lizzie Rose, 1 on each cheek, I think. As soon as the Red Knight noticed that there was no longer any danger... I skipped over there. Then the king's daughter said to him, "Sleep a little while on my lap." And while Lillekort lay there, she pulled a silver tunic onto him. And as soon as the Red Knight noticed there was no longer any danger, he clambered down from the tree and threatened the princess for so long that she had to promise to say that it was he, the Red Knight, who had saved her. So he took the tongues and lungs of the trolls and laid them in his handkerchief and brought the king's daughter back to the castle. Here there was rejoicing and joy, you should know, and the king didn't know at all how he should behave to show the Red Knight honor and glory enough. But Lillekort took with him a fathom of gold and silver goods, and such from the troll's ship. And when he came back to the king's farm, the kitchen maid clapped her hands together and wondered over where he'd gotten all this silver and gold from, but didn't wonder too much. For Lillekort replied that he'd been at home a while, and these were the goods that had fallen out of some vessels. He had brought them with him for the kitchen maid, he said. Now, when the Thursday evening came, things went just the same as they had the previous time. The whole king's farm was dressed in black, and everyone was weeping in solemn mourning. But the Red Knight said he thought they didn't have so much to be afraid of. If he had saved the king's daughter from 2 trolls, then he could save her from the third too. He took her down to the beach, but when the time for the troll to come drew close, he clambered up a tree and hid himself again, shuddering in his expensive boots. The princess wept and bade him stay, but he didn't help. He repeated himself, "It is better that one lose their life than 2, said the Red Knight. And that evening Lillekort also asked leave to go down to the beach. "What will you do there?" replied the kitchen maid, but he asked for so long until he was at last allowed to go. Even so, he had to promise that he'd be back in the kitchen when the roast should be turned. No sooner had he come to the beach than the troll came, so that the foam roared, and it was much, much bigger than either of the others, and it had 15 heads! "Fire!" screamed the troll. "Fire back," said Lillekort. "Can you fence?" shrieked the troll. "If I cannot, then I can learn," said Lillekort. "I shall teach you," and shrieked the troll, striking out at him with his iron bar, so the spray of earth stood 15 ells into the air. "Well," said Lillekort, "that was something." "Indeed. You shall see a stroke from me." And immediately he grasped his sword and struck at the troll, so all its 15 heads danced across the sand. Then the princess was saved, and she both thanked and blessed Lillekort because he had saved her. "Sleep now, a little while in my lap," she said, and while he lay there, she pulled a brass tunic onto him. "But how shall we reveal that it was you who saved me?" said the king's daughter. "I shall tell you. Just prepare for the usual nonsense," replied Lillekort. "When the Red Knight has brought you home again, and pretends to be the one who has saved you, then you know he will have you in half the kingdom. But when they ask you on your wedding day who you want to fill your bowls, you shall say, 'I want the little boy who is in the kitchen and carries wood and water for the kitchen maid. And as I fill the bowls, I will spill a drop on his plate, but not on yours. And so he will grow angry and strike me, and this we will both do thrice. But the third time you shall say, Shame on you, who strikes the desire of my heart. He has saved me, and him will I have.' And then Lillekort ran back to the king's farm, just like the other times. But first he was out on the troll ship as quickly as he could, and brought a whole trove of gold and silver and other costly things. And from that he gave the kitchen maid a whole lap full of gold and silver goods. And as soon as that Red Knight saw that all the danger was over, well, we know what he does. He climbed down from the tree and he threatened the king's daughter to promise to say that he had saved her. And then he brought her back to the king's farm, and he had enough honor and glory had not been given him before than it was now. I'm so special and brave. I killed all the trolls, me alone. I'm pretty sure that's what he did. The king thought of nothing other than how he should honor him who saved his daughter from the 3 trolls. And it was said that he should have both her and half the kingdom. But on the day of the wedding, the princess asked that she might have the little boy who was in the kitchen and carried wood and water for the kitchen maid to fill the bowls at the wedding table. "Oh, and what do you want with that black rag boy in the hair?" said the Red Knight. And the princess said she wanted him to serve and none other, and finally she was allowed to. And so everything went the way it was agreed upon between Lillekort and the king's daughter. He spilled a drop on the Red Knight's plate, but none on hers. And each time the Red Knight struck him. At the first stroke, the ragged tunic fell off Lillekort. And at the second stroke, that brass tunic fell off. And at the third stroke, the silver tunic, so that he stood there in a golden tunic, gleaming so fine he shone. Then the king's daughter said, "Shame on you, who strikes the desire of my heart. He has saved me, and him will I have." The Red Knight cursed and swore that he saved her, but then the king said, "The one who has saved my daughter has, I suppose, something to show for it." Yes, the Red Knight sprang quickly for his kerchief with the lungs and tongues in it, and Lillekort fetched all the gold and silver and every fine thing he'd taken from the troll ships, and they each laid theirs before the king. "He who has such costly things of gold and silver and precious stones," said the king, "he must have killed the trolls, for such is not to be had from anyone else." And so the Red Knight was thrown into the pit of serpents, and Lillekort should have the princess and half the kingdom. And I know it feels like the end, but we are not at the end of this story. We're kind of close, but not nearly as close as you think. But I will say, are venomous snakes a thing in Norway? Because it feels like this must be a hangover from a story further south for him to be thrown into. The story that I know, the version of this part of the story of going to the beach and lopping the heads off the trolls, the guy's punishment was he was shoved in a nail barrel and kicked down a hill, which is graphic. There's more than one tale I've seen that does that. But we're not done yet. One day the king and Lillekort took a walk. Then Lillekort asked the king if he hadn't had any more children. "Yes," said the king, "I have had another daughter, but the troll has taken her, for there was none who could save her. Now you shall have one of my daughters, but if you can save the one whom the troll has taken to, then you shall have her and the other half of the kingdom." I think one of my favorite tropes in all these stories is the reveal that kings are useless. "I shall have to try," said Lillekort, "but I must have an iron chain that is 500 ells long, and I want 500 men and supplies for them for 15 weeks, for I shall go far to sea," he said. Yes, this he would have, but the king was afraid he didn't have a ship that was big enough to carry everything. Jumpstore says they have adders in Norway. Well, that answers that question. I didn't know that. How? It's so cold for so long. How did they survive? This isn't a question for the story. I'll figure it out myself later. I have a ship myself, said Lillekort, taking the one he'd been given by the old wife out of his pocket. And the king laughed at him, thinking it was nothing more than a joke, but Lillekort merely asked for what he had desired, and then the king would see. They came in with it all together, and Lillekort asked them to put the chain into the ship first, but there was none who could lift it, and many could not make room in the tiny ship at once. Then Lillekort himself took the chain at one end, and laid some links up in the ship, and as he threw the chain in, the ship grew bigger, and finally it was so large that the chain and the 500 men and supplies, and Lillekort had good room. Go now, over fresh water and salt water, mountains and deep valleys, and don't stop before you come whither the king's daughter is, said Lillekort to the ship, and straightway it shot off, that it whistled and whined around them over both land and water. And let me get this picture, and this is a niche poll. This isn't going to mean a lot to a lot of people. But I run, as I've mentioned before, I DM 3 different tables for tabletop RPGs. And one of them is a D&D table. It's a 5th edition D&D table, but it is Spelljammer. And Spelljammer is a name for ships that fly in the skies. It's a whole open seas analogy or whatever else. And when I saw this, I was like, there it is. There's the folkloric route that is being continued by D&D again. Because I've said this before, D&D is folklore. It's folk art, if nothing else, but it's folklore. It is one of the ways that folklore continues. And I thought of it immediately when I saw it. In fact, D&D does have a small little folding ship too, but that's a little bit different than the Spelljammer. When they had sailed far, far away in such a manner, the ship stopped in the midst of the sea. Yes, now we have arrived, said Lillekort. But how are we to come away from here again is another matter. And then he took the iron chain and wrapped one end of it around his waist. Now I have to go to the bottom, he said, but when I jerk the chain, I want to come up again. You must pull as one man. Otherwise there will be no life to speak of, neither for you nor for me. And with that he jumped into the sea, so that the spray stood golden around him. He sank, and finally he came to the bottom, and there he saw a great rock with a door in it. And this he went through. And when he came in, he found the other king's daughter. She sat sewing, but when she saw Lillekort, she clapped her hands together. "Oh, thank God," she cried. "Now I haven't seen a Christian man since I came here." "Indeed, I have come for you," said Lillekort. "Oh, you won't get me," said the king's daughter. "It isn't even worth thinking about. If the troll sees you, he will kill you." "It is well you speak of him," said Lillekort. "Where is he? It might be fun to see him again." See him, rather. Doesn't say again. So the king's daughter told him that the troll was out to see if he could find someone who knew how to brew 100 batches of malt in one brew. Bet you forgot that happened. For there was to be a feast at the troll's, and nothing less would do. "Well, I can do that," said Lillekort. "Indeed, if only the troll weren't so quick-tempered, so that I could tell him," replied the king's daughter. "But he is quick to anger. That he will rip you to pieces as soon as he comes in, I'm afraid, but I shall try to think of something. Now you may hide yourself in that basket here, and we shall see how things go." Well, Lillekort did so, and hardly had he crept into the basket and hidden himself before the troll came. "Here it smells of Christian man's blood," said the troll. "Yes, a bird flew across the roof with a Christian man's bone in its beak, and that dropped it down the chimney," replied the king's daughter. "I hurried quickly enough to be rid of it, but that is which smells anyways." Jumpstore says, did she forget all the trolls he killed before? This is a different sister. This is the older sister. that he told him about later. Although he is under the sea, and she did just tell a troll that the bone was dropped by a bird in the chimney. At least that was my understanding of the sequence. Well, I suppose it is, said the troll. And then the king's daughter asked him if he'd found anyone who could brew 100 batches of a malt in a single brew. No, there is no one who can do it, said the troll. A little while ago there was one here who could do it, said the king's daughter. You are always so wise, you are, said the troll. So why did you let him go again, then? You knew I wanted to find someone like that. Oh, I didn't let him go, though, said the king's daughter. But father grows so quickly angry, so I hid him in the basket. If father hasn't found anyone, then here he is. Let him come in, said the troll. And when Lillekort came, the troll asked him if it was true that he could brew 100 batches of malt in a single brew. Yes, said Lillekort. It was good that I found you, said the troll. Set straight to work, but so help you if you don't brew the beer strong. Oh, it will surely have a strong flavor, said Lillekort, beginning to brew. But I must have more trolls to carry the brewing vat, said Lillekort. That which I have cannot manage much. But he got some more, so many that they swarmed, and then the brewing got underway. And when the wort was finished, they should all taste it, you understand. First the troll itself, and then the other. But Lillekort had brewed the wort so strong that they fell dead like flies, each as he drank it. Finally, there was none left but a pathetic old woman who lay behind the stove. Oh, you poor thing, said Lillekort. You should taste the wort too. And so he scraped around the bottom of the brewing vessel with a stick, gave it to her, and then he was rid of them all. I'm going to leave chat to chew on that. As he stood now and looked around, he caught sight of a large chest. This Lillekort took and filled with gold and silver, and then he tied the chain around himself and the king's daughter and the chest and jerked it with all his might. With that, the crew hauled them up in good condition. When Lillekort had come aboard again, he said, Go now, over the salt water and fresh water, mountains and deep valleys, and don't stop before you have come to the king's farm. And straightway the ship shot off, so the wake stood golden around it. And when those at the king's farm saw the ship, they weren't slow to meet it with song and music and receive them. But gladdest of all was the king, who had now recovered his other daughter. And now he who was uneasy was Lillekort, for both king's daughters would have him, and he wanted none but the first he had saved. Now is here where you remember something that I am 100% certain you've all forgotten. She was the youngest. He often walked therefore deep in thought of how he might behave in order to have her, for he would rather not act against the other. And one day as he walked, thinking on this, he suddenly thought that if only he had his brother with him. Remember that? Remember this started with a brother? King Lavrin, who was so like him that none could tell the difference between them. And then he could have the other king's daughter and half the kingdom, for he thought that he had enough with the one half. Hardly had he thought of it before he left the castle and called for King Lavering. No one came. So he called again, straight from the belly this time. But no, still there came no one. So with a deep breath and a powerful shout, Lillekort called a third time, all his might behind it, and then his brother stood there. I said you shouldn't call for me unless you were in your direst needs, his brother said to Lillekort. And here there isn't even a mosquito that can do anything to you. And with that, he smote him so that Lillekort rolled across the ground. Shame on you for striking me, said Lillekort. First I won the one king's daughter, and then half the kingdom, and then the other king's daughter, and the other half the kingdom, and now I had the thought to give you one of the king's daughter and half the kingdom with me, and do you think it's reasonable to behave like that? Well, when King Lavering heard this, he apologized to his brother, and they were soon good friends and reconciled. Now you know, said Lillekort, that we are so alike that no one can distinguish the one of us from the other. Change clothes with me now. Go up to the castle, so the king's daughter think it is I who comes. The first one to kiss you, you shall have, and I shall take the other. And he knew that the eldest king's daughter was the strongest, and he understood how things might go. King Lavering, soon willing to do so, he changed clothes with his brother, and he went up to the castle, and when he came into the room with the king's daughters, both thought it was Lillekort, and both immediately ran to him, and the eldest, who was the biggest and strongest, pushed her sister aside and embraced King Lavering's neck and kissed him, and thus he had her, and Lillekort had the youngest king's daughter. Then perhaps there was a wedding, and such a one that was heard of and asked of across 7 kingdoms. I'm just going to say it. Lillekort is a terrible person. He really, at no point does anything I would consider good. Also, he just hates old women. I do not understand why he's like, hey, why don't you die? Like, maybe it was implied that she was not just an old woman, but an old troll woman. But I feel like it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe it was. Still. So, I mean, we had in the beginning there, a lot of people recognized some of the legends of, some Greek legend in there. Somebody noticed Freya and her boat were present in there for sure. But also, we've seen the troll in the beach story before play out that way. Just that piece. We haven't seen a lot of flying ships, to be honest. That was, it's not unique because it comes up in mythology, but that's not as common in folklore. And then, Jesus, how reckless if you say that, where he's just misunderstood. I mean, he lies his own brother in the end to trick him into marrying whatever. Uncle Kitty says he really is awful. I mean, he's definitely an old world ethos, I guess. The mighty succeed, and who cares about mercy and whatever else. I've not seen exactly the formulation of like a baby fresh born walking into the world to my memory, but the sequence that occurs after that where he meets 3 old women walking along at a very young age from his house, because it was that way. We've seen a formulation like that before. I remember that it had I forget where we saw it, but I remember at one point a dog got killed in it rather than like eyes stolen, but it was the same kind of gist. Yeah, we had the troll one. Yeah, and then at the end we get a reference to the other troll formulation. Sorry, that took me a minute. We've seen a few versions of that troll formulation where he comes into a house. The princess is there. She's worried that he's going to get killed when the troll comes home. Usually, though, that formulation is tied to the idea that the weapon is really heavy that kills him. And so he has to drink like a draft that gives him strength. And then he like chops the head off. Or sometimes it's a bomb that gives him strength. Or he gets killed and he uses a bomb to come back to life and kill the troll. Or we've seen a few versions of that. But the sort of thread that you see, the meme, if you will, in the more traditional sense of meme, between those stories is that idea that a bird came along and dropped a Christian man's bone down the chimney, comes up in all those formulations of stories. Yeah, it just is a big mishmash of a bunch of things that we've seen, all stitched together into one very strange epic of a genuinely reprehensible man. But it's a different time. Jumpstore says Hermes did that. Yep. Hermes, he runs out when he's born, right? It's been a while since I've done much Greek stuff, so my memory is fuzzy, but I think that's what you mean. That's the part you're referencing. Yeah. There's a lot of cultural thread in there, which is, as you do folklore, you'll see more and more of that, and it is very telling about where stories come from and what is bad for them. All right. That's enough of me babbling. That was one of the longer stories we've told. I do want to mention, because we are right on the crest of October, I sort of hinted at this earlier. I don't know that I'm really going to be able to do a lot of October-y stuff this year. I'm going to do my best, but there's kind of two reasons. One is that I'm kind of running out of supplies of that kind of content. It's hard to find stuff that's in the public domain, that's kind of folklore-y. We usually end up reading some single author stuff, but it has kind of like a folklore feel to it in one way or another. I do enjoy reading it. But the other issue is it's like 4 times the work to do the Halloween shows, because there's just so much content to sift through that can't be used, unlike folklore collections and stuff. And I am in a wedding party helping a friend with a wedding this month. Their wedding in October. So that's going to take most of my time and attention. So if we do anything Halloween-y, it's probably going to be near the end of October. But if I come across stuff, or if I see recommendations in the comments or something for something, I'll go take a look at it. And if it's something I can make work, then I will make it work, because I know that people really do enjoy it. But yes, what I don't think will happen is my really long read-throughs that we usually do on the 30th, because that takes like all month to put together. I have to put together a bunch of things for those to work, and I just don't know when I'm going to do it this month. So I will apologize. It's not the end of the tradition, but it's just it's a perfect storm of a month where I don't think it's going to happen. So I'll let you down now. Tammy says good night. Thank you for your kind words, Tammy. I hope you feel good, because I know you've had a few uncomfortable months there. Jumpstore says Hermes left home, killed a tortoise to make a lyre, stole Apollo's cattle, walked home backwards to trick Apollo, even ate some of the cattle by the time Apollo caught him. Was able to talk himself out of any punishment. So do you think that Lillekort is a Hermes character, or do you think he's just sort of borrowing those traditions for a longer story? All within the day he was born, yeah. Yeah, I know that it's a bit of a cliche to say that these stories are sort of pagan gods with the VIN number filed off. and that there's a lot of pushback on being kind of a lazy framing for a lot of folklore. Like, it's like you can just create folklore without that. But so much that happens here makes a hell of a lot more sense if you assume that Lillekort is supposed to be like an old pagan god. You know, his brother showing up in his flying ship and stuff. Like, it really, really feels like that's probably where it came from. All right. Uncle Kitty says, Lillekort reminds me of some of the men born from a peach type stories. Yeah, that's a good call. Gia says, don't worry. We won't let you off the hook, Rory. All right. Well, thank you. Otherwise, I will see you guys next month, because it is basically the end of the month. And we will have more stories. I will still be doing the streams. They just might not be Halloween. As for me, though, I'll keep the fire warm. You folks, have yourself a good sleep.